So I gave up. If you're out there, I can't do this anymore. At that moment, this amazing serenity came over me. The pain was gone. The paranormal activity was gone. It felt like 100 boulders had been lifted off of me, and it was so serene and peaceful. Then I heard this big booming voice that asked, "Are you ready?" That would be when I ended up flatlining and my heart stopped. When my heart stopped, I was completely separated from my body. I had no recollection of this person, Brianna, this earth, this human form, anything. And I was in this beautiful, loving blackness. I was just pure energy. And that is where I met the creator, the God. And there was nothing but pure love. And I felt home. And I knew that this was the beginning of everything. This was the place of all beginnings, all possibilities, and creation.
Well, hello, Brianna Lafferty. Welcome to the show. I'm truly honored by you joining me and looking forward to our conversation. How are you feeling today?
I am feeling amazing and so excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, good. Well, every week we bring these powerful stories about life and death, awakening, and what it means to be human. And if that resonates with you, you'll love what's coming. Today I'm joined by Brianna Lafferty, who flatlined in 2017 after a lifetime of chronic illness, spiritual attack, and relentless suffering. But what came next changed everything. She had a near-death experience where she entered a realm of pure consciousness where thoughts created reality and math revealed the universe and joy replaced fear. This is one of the most mind-expanding near-death experiences I've ever heard, and it just might change how you see everything. So welcome, Brianna. I couldn't be more happy for you to be here today. I'm familiar with your story. I know it's a powerful NDE, and I know you're going to share that. And afterwards, we're going to get into the post-NDE, which is really kind of the crazy stuff, and people are going to love it. Sound good?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'll give you the microphone and the stage, and the storyline is yours.
All right. Thank you so much. So I like to start by kind of describing what led up to my near-death experience because it was 15 years in the making. I started developing symptoms of a rare neurological movement disorder when I was 10. However, it was so rare that it would take 8 years for me to get diagnosed. And in this time, it progressed, and the doctors didn't know what to do, threw pharmaceuticals at me, misdiagnoses, undiagnoses. And I'm also a young female going through puberty, which adds another layer of stress. I also moved from having a dozen friends my age on a street to a town with maybe two girls um, in the whole city, like the whole town. So I also became pretty isolated. And within a couple years after that, I started experiencing really crazy paranormal experiences. I started seeing ghosts, I saw auras, and I saw inanimate objects move, and all this was kind of building up, and I developed a lot of insomnia on top of the symptoms of this condition that I was then diagnosed with. And symptoms included tremoring, muscle rigidity, involuntary muscle movement, non-epileptic myoclonic seizures. And then it also has a psychological aspect of anxiety, depression, OCD, but you add that to all the other stuff I was going through, and it's just compounded. I still try to make the most of my life. I've always had a thirst for life, a love for life, and the doctors said, well, we don't know what's going on with you, but because of your symptoms, you can't ride a motorcycle, you can't rock climb, you can't swim, you can't ski because it could kill you. And it's like, so you're telling me not to live in order not to die? So I never took that one to heart. I loved riding motorcycles and rock climbing and skiing and swimming and all the things. I said, well, if it kills me, at least I'll do something I love. And it would be 18 years old when I was finally diagnosed with myoclonus dystonia. And even as of last year, when I looked it up, it's still less than 1 in a million estimated to have it worldwide. So very, very rare. And they really had no prognosis. They didn't know if it was fatal or progressive. They said it wasn't progressive, but I continued to progress for over 15 years. So, and they didn't know much. When I was diagnosed at the Anschutz Center in Colorado, they were honest. They said, we've never heard of this condition, or we've heard of it once. We've never seen it. We would love to study you. You know, will you be a case study? That's how rare it was. And at that time, they had already tried all the pharmaceuticals they could think of, and we had reached out to try different alternative medicines. Basically, it was like you're on your own. So I continued trying to live my best life. I bought a house at 19. I went to college. I was a waitress, but it was really difficult. Like every moment of every day was a fight of survival. And I wasn't sleeping. And when I say I wasn't sleeping, I mean zero sleep for days. Not a cat nap here and there, not, an hour here and there. By the time I reached my 20s, it was 0 hours of sleep within 3 days. And I was still pretty functionable, but it was hard. It was lonely. No one's up in the middle of the night. You can't go do a lot of things in the middle of the night. And I didn't have energy and I hurt. So I just kept kept pushing on. Well, the time comes and it's 2016, 2017, and since I was 15, I had this innate knowing I was going to die before 28. I didn't know how, but I'm just getting sicker and sicker, and nothing is getting easier in life. And I sold my house and decided to move away because I knew the time was coming. I knew I was going to die within probably the year or two. So I used the proceeds of the house and went and bought or rented a beautiful apartment in San Antonio, Texas. And just still tried to live my best life. I love the water, so I spent a lot of time on the water, exploring, did a lot of caves. They have so many caves in that area. Traveled around to Austin, New Braunfels, and the River Walk, and just really tried to enjoy what I could of life. And the myoclonus dystonia is just getting so bad, and I am having these non-epileptic myoclonic seizures pretty consistently, at least a few times a week, if not a day, and still not sleeping, still have this crazy paranormal experiences that no one could really explain to me. I grew up Christian, and my church told me, well, if you're saved, you can't have these experiences. I didn't have anyone else tell me that is not true at all. So it was like, okay, is it in my head? What's going on? Luckily, my mom was more open than our church, and she, constantly said, these are real things. People do experience this. You're not crazy. And that was really helpful. But then I am not sleeping. I'm exhausted. I'm in a lot of pain. And then I get the flu. And that just I was so exhausted. I was like, it's just the flu. I'll get over it. But I couldn't hold down food or water or anything, and I refused to go see the doctor because I was like, I was so mistreated for a long time in the medical industry. Like, what are they going to do for a flu? And I just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and I was so exhausted. And my parents knew something was really wrong, so they booked the soonest flight they could to come see me, which was in a couple days. And my mom and I would be on the phone like all day, every day leading up to this because she was really worried. And I was so tired and just kind of starting to even lose my mind a little bit. Just so exhausted, couldn't make sense of things. And at 2 in the morning on April 27th, 2017, my mom and I were on the phone, and I realized this poor woman has been up with me for 3 days. She needs to try to get some sleep. The only way that's going to happen is if I say I'm going to try to get some sleep. And I tell her, I'm going to try to get some sleep and hang up the phone at 2 a.m. And when I do that, I realize I have nothing left. I have no energy, no motivation, no reserves, and I am exhausted beyond a core. That means my body is tired, like I could hardly move at this point. My heart is tired. I've been fighting for 15 years. Um, my mind is exhausted. It takes a lot of mental work to try to, live and keep going and, live a life that you could want to live. And then I didn't even know at the time, but my soul was also exhausted. And I just kind of called out to this God that, I wasn't really sure who he was because when I was younger, if you believed hard enough, if your heart was strong enough, if you had enough faith, God would heal you. And I'd pray, I'd beg, I'd scream, I'd, yell at God, and nothing ever happened. So I gave up. I was like, if you're out there, I can't do this anymore. It's in your hands. And at that moment, this amazing serenity came over me. The pain was gone, the paranormal activity was gone. Just, it felt like 100 boulders had been lifted off of me, and it was so serene and peaceful. Then I heard this big booming voice that asked, "Are you ready?" I didn't hesitate to even ponder what that meant. I was like, something just drastically happened when I, you know, surrendered basically, and I instantly said yes. And that is the moment I felt it felt like really 3 hard pounds on in my chest. And that would be when I ended up flatlining and my heart stopped. When my heart stopped, I was completely separated from my body. I had no recollection of this person, Brianna, this earth, this human form, anything. And I was in this beautiful, loving blackness. It was pure black. I couldn't tell if there was space or anything. I was just pure energy, and there was nothing but pure energy in here. And that is where I met the creator, the God, the being I basically cried out to without knowing. And there was nothing but pure love, and I felt home. And I knew that this was the beginning of everything. This was the place of all beginnings, all possibilities, and creation. And even though I was not aware of this person named Brianna or Earth, my consciousness knew something had drastically shifted. And I just had the thought, am I dead? And out of the blackness appears 3 monks. Once again, raised Christian. I don't know why there were monks, but Tibetan based on the robes. And they were just kind of floating by, giving me this big grin, as if to say, if you only knew. They didn't say any word, but that was kind of the look on their face. And I was like, huh, okay, curious. That doesn't answer anything, but I wasn't too concerned. I didn't, deep dive into it. I was just, oh, okay, curious. And they float back into the blackness. From there, I entered this amazing bright white and blue tunnel. And in this tunnel, it is filled with binary code. Like if you're going down a tube to slide at a water park and you can kind of see the sun coming through, but imagine all around you is binary code. And I'm still just energy at this point, and I'm being downloaded with some of this binary code. No idea what it was at the time. I just knew it was amazing and it would come to me when I needed it. And I was going super fast, felt like supersonic speed, and just a really cool experience. Then I ended up in another place, and it was completely white. In front of me was a huge pile of black numbers. And this is the only time in the experience that I had a human-like body. And I pick up these numbers and throw them up in the air. Say, no wonder you love creating things, because I realized the universe is created in math. Then I moved from that place to the place that I would spend the most of my experience in. This is the most fun place. I mean, all of them were really full of love and joy, but this one was full of curiosity. There were other beings here. They didn't look human. I didn't know where they'd come from or where they were going or where we were, really. The place was kind of reminiscent of Earth looking back. There was buildings, streets, utility poles, trees, machinery, and stuff like that. And I see these other beings sliding down these snow-covered trees. And I was like, oh, that looks like so much fun. But I don't think I like snow. Instantly, it turned to lush green trees that I'm sliding down. They're moss covered. I feel like Tarzan. And I realized, oh my gosh, if I don't like snow, but these other beings do, maybe they're experiencing snow while we're sliding down these trees together, but or whatever version of their reality they want. But we're experiencing this together. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. There was other points where I was alongside these other beings and we never communicated. There was no, verbal language. It was even faster than telepathy. You think of telepathy as you having a thought, somebody receiving it, you know, kind of like conversation, but silently. But it was just like we knew. We moved as one, we worked as one, and yet we were very, very much individual. I didn't know who these other beings were, but there was a deep-rooted sense of connectiveness. And there's another point where I tried to learn to fly in this place, and I was terrible at it. I ended up severing my arm on a utility pole. But there's no pain, there's no fear, and so I just kind of like, oh, what's gonna happen? And I see it grow back with a binary code, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. There's some other points where we danced all together as if we'd choreographed this dance for millennia without saying a word. A point where there were beings working on a machine with a huge flame out of it. I was like, huh, I wonder what happens if I get too close. Will I melt? Well, instantly, I was under the flame, melted in a puddle of eyeballs, and I just thought, well, I wonder if these beings will put me back together. Sure enough, a few beings came back, put me back together, and, we continued on. And there was a ton of stuff that happened in this, I don't know, realm, dimension, and those are just the most fun highlights that, I like to share. Towards the end of this realm, there's a barbed wire fence. And usually, here we can see beyond barbed wire unless, there's grass growing or something, but you can see beyond it. In this place, I could not. It was really blurry. And there's a small opening in the fence and a land bridge that kind of went into this blurry area. And I wasn't asked if I could go. I wasn't, told I had to, go back to Earth because I still didn't know I was from Earth. And some of the beings start crossing, and I just knew I couldn't go with them. Which leads me to the last part of my experience where I end up in what kind of feels like a small room with these seven magnificent beings. And I don't know who they are. I've had a few different ideas thrown out at me, and none have really hit the clarity part yet. And they're behind me, and in front of me is this scroll. I mean, it is as tall as I am. And there's this beautiful, sparkling golden script being written on it. And all of a sudden, my human self, my human ego comes back and says, ha, you're showing this to a human. And just like that, the script is wiped away, the scroll is rolled up, and I'm snapped back into my body. And it's one thing to feel your heart stop, but it is a way wilder thing to feel it start again.
That's crazy. Well, so that is a very different NDE because it really feels like you're over there in a playground, having all
Yes.
these interesting experiences. And as I've heard this story, it kind of feels to me also like you were over there and these experiences were being shared with you of how to manifest sort of immediately with your thoughts and intentions effectively. And it's kind of like, okay, now we're sending you back and realize that's really who you are. And also know that if you can develop that on this side, you can start to do the manifestation here also.
Yeah, 100%. It absolutely felt like a playground. I knew there were higher frequencies and higher dimensions. I knew there were lower ones, but I loved playing. I would go back in a heartbeat or a lack thereof. And it was just so much fun. It was just full of curiosity, pure love, and joy. And it was amazing. But the point that I could instantly create reality by just having the thought would play huge into my life here afterwards. It would take me a while to understand it, but once I realized that was the important part of that experience is that our thoughts do control our reality here, whether you are aware of it or not.
I've heard you say before that you had 4 or 5 days of sleep deprivation, and by the time you get to the fifth day, you're even hallucinating. So, can you just take a minute like a couple of bullets on this is what a dream is like, this is what hallucination is like, and this is what an NDE is like.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked. So for me, dreams, I usually didn't have too many of, for one, and when I had them, they'd be forgotten pretty quickly upon waking up. I never tracked my dreams. I never did a dream journal. Um, so it just the memory fades very, very quickly. And even if you do remember parts of a dream, um, my sister has a much better recall of dreams. Um, but I also know about lucid dreaming, where you can control things that happen in your dream, but it usually takes skill or awareness. And you don't dream in 8 minutes. So when I came back to my body, it was 2:08, which blew my mind. I thought it was months later. I thought I'd open my eyes and find I was buried underground. That's how long I felt like I was gone. So you don't dream in 8 minutes. I mean, especially such a detailed dream. Hallucinations. I've had, several instances of them with my chronic insomnia, and they are very, very different. They are very confusing. They are scary. Trying to make sense of what's real, what's not, very jarring usually. So, and then, looking back on the hallucination, it's really fuzzy still, like really not clear what was real, what wasn't. You try to make sense of things through this very, very blurry picture. However, my NDE has been crystal clear since the moment I came back to now. It's been over 8 years, and I can still recall every single detail and just think and replay the whole thing in my head. I mean, you can't even remember a TV show or a movie like that, even if you watch it, every week for years. And it is just so crystal clear, first off. And then the things that have happened since then, the things that I've learned since then, there's just absolutely no doubt that I was in this completely other experience.
Well, that's true, and we're going to go into that part next. And that is also this concrete truth that something significant happened. You know what is different here also? You weren't like in an OR with paddles on you. You were in your apartment and you just gave up. You just surrendered essentially. And the universe said, okay, thank you. I was waiting for that. Now I'm going to pop you out of here and I'm going to give you this crazy experience you're going to love. And it's going to feel like it was over days or months, but I'm going to pop you back in 8 minutes later on the physical clock that we have right here. So that's different there. And we're going to go into what happened post that in a minute. But first, you were traveling through this tunnel at one point and you saw binary code flying around. Well, I happen to have a couple of degrees in electrical and computer engineering, and back in the day, we had to create and design computers from scratch, first the hardware and then the software. So I'm very familiar with machine language, which is the binary code of zeros and ones, and everything drops down into that. Zeros and ones are extrapolated up into bytes, and then higher level software uses that to give you visual images. It's an abstraction layer, and it's a beautiful thing. But at the very core of it, it is zeros and ones. So in the movie The Matrix, that's what you see in there. They kind of drop in a shower of zeros and ones going on there. And it's funny, when you did it in your world, did it look the same or a little different? Because the notion of quantum, as you mentioned, also the quantum bit or the qubit, is infinite states between 0 and 1, kind of a combination of those, but they may look similar. What did that visually look like when you saw that?
Yeah, so in the Matrix, you kind of see ones and zeros kind of going down or up, in these lines. And in my experience, both in the tunnel and when my armory grew, they weren't um, they weren't so organized like that. There was, like 1, 0, 1, off center just a little bit, both times. And so it wasn't, so grid-like or, you know, con like constructed. But I would say now that you explained that, the in-betweens, that makes a lot more sense because all the possibilities, all the in-betweens, that's why they weren't, perfectly organized.
Aha, that might be it. I think you were seeing qubits that were just showering down as random as they could possibly be. But you also reflected on this that the universe is made of math. Really, everything in this physical manifestation, some call it a simulation, some call it who knows what, but it certainly feels like there would be math behind it to organize the whole thing and to reprogram it. And it sounds like we're going to get into that here in just a minute. So, what are your before we do? What are your thoughts there on the notion of like the Fibonacci sequence or sacred geometry, and how colors and sound effectively are all just a series of frequencies, and energy is as well.
Oh my gosh. So I didn't know how I felt about all of that before this experience, or even for a little while after. But I am completely obsessed now. I wasn't huge in, like, I was good at math, but, I was not a computer engineer, software engineer. I, was like, okay, I'm good at math, but I don't, I'm not a math nerd. I don't love it. But coming back and seeing the Fibonacci sequence and, even all the different designs, like our pineal gland being a pine cone, and seeing that these different religions and different cultures sees that, and how that in itself is kind of a Fibonacci sequence. And then the sacred geometry and just capturing sound and light in frozen water, or using water to, show these beautiful patterns. And just, I love the water. And when I'm on the lake and there's just a little wind, sometimes you see this grid. And it's just, you see patterns upon patterns upon patterns. And math is everywhere. And some more things that I learned since then is, these frequencies of feelings. And I love these experiments where you have two plants and you either play great music or horrible music. You speak words of love or words of hate, and they are receptacle to it, because we are all energy and we are all math. Well, so is frequency. Frequency is another form of math. And when you know where your frequency's at, and where I was this super high frequency. It was so high that we had no physical, like, it wasn't so matter, and things could change and be fluid. Where here, I was really freaked out about solid things for a good week. I kept touching the walls. I felt like I was shoved in a sausage casing. Everything was so hard, it kind of freaked me out. And Dr. Joe Dispenza would later describe it as matter is the slowest form of frequency. And it takes time for your thoughts to create reality, because it has to slow down into matter. And it just made so much sense to me. And the fact he talked about going into the blackness where there's nowhere, no time, no body, nothing, no place. It's like, oh, that's the place I first went in my near-death experience, where there was nothing but possibilities. And I was positive he had a near-death experience, because how else would he know this? He did not. He's fascinated by near-death experiences, but he has not had one himself. Um, and I was just really excited to see if it was the same place and how to get there without dying again, because that in itself was a very traumatic experience and took me a long time, about 18 months, to really get over. Um, so I dove into, his kind of research and his philosophies and kind of what he thought, and tried his meditations and ended up getting in that space again without dying, and in a beautiful way.
Well, he may not have had the experience, but it is common enough across NDs to go into the blackness that is nothingness and is everythingness. And as you stated, it's the beginning and the origins of everything. So that's pretty cool. And so when he heard you say that, he knew that you had been there in the place that he had heard in other stories. So it's kind of cool that, and many people watching this are going to go, how do I get there? Right. And so you were able to, and as I've heard you say many times, you could get there a number of different ways. But for you, it resonated with you to go to Dr. Joe Dispenza and go through his meditation practice to get yourself there. And so you can take a minute and talk about that. And from what I've heard before, you've got yourself there, and anytime you saw a thought come around, you had to chase it out. Effectively, you needed to be so separated from your body that would not even allow thoughts. And then my question is, once you finally get out there, what is it that does the reprogramming of your brain condition? And what is it that are you just witnessing it? Because you're certainly not directing it, because that would be your mind doing it, right? You must be more witnessing this experience that you're having of healing out there.
I want to start with the misconception that, meditation is completely blanking out your mind. It is more so directing it very focused. into the abyss, into the darkness, and getting out of your body, getting I call it transcending, like transcendental meditation, even though it's not the typical kind because it's not mantras or chanting. I'm not sure what kind of meditation Dr. Joe even calls it, but I know I transcend my body because I feel nothing, hear nothing. I am completely detached from my 3D senses. And I go back into this beautiful place of blackness. But sometimes it takes, a very strong thought. I try not to go in with, I'm going to do this while I'm here. It's just, I'm going to get there. And I really like his meditation because he helps guide. So, I can listen and it's a lot easier to train the brain. He says you have to train it like a dog. You sit, you stay. Oh, good. Scroll. No, no, come back. You come back. You say you pay attention. Instead of letting all these thoughts come in and around. It's one focused thought, and it could be the intention of just going into the blackness. Sometimes I have to visualize my soul as this little light that I'm chasing down into this infinite blackness. And the further I go, the further detached I get. And some amazing things happen when I get there. So usually it is just my soul in blackness. Sometimes I could see some energy in my soul. The one time that I went into the blackness and ended up healing from myoclonus dystonia was in this blackness, my heart and my brain showed up in front of me. And then this binary code that I saw in my tunnel started circulating through it. And I knew that it was coming from the love, the source, God. And I then set the intention. I was like, I don't know what it's doing, but I want to make sure it goes through my heart of gratitude, my heart of love before going back into my brain. And so that was the only intention I set. But I saw this kind of like projected in front of me, not a full body, just my heart and brain and this code. And I just, focused on allowing it to you know, do that, witnessing it, making sure that my heart was full of love and gratitude, and that's about it. When I came out of the meditation, I knew I had been healed of myoclonus dystonia, which is absolutely, kind of sounds nuts. I did not intend to heal from myoclonus dystonia. I went to, heal from some things I wrote out of survival, some programs, subconscious programs I wrote out of survival. We all do. And that was my only intention. And it comes out that I heal from this neurological movement disorder that the doctors can't even do much about. Um, and this condition, like I said, is all day, every day. So I would have pain. I would have this muscle rigidity from the dystonia. I would have involuntary muscle movements and, these non-epileptic seizures, up, sometimes a few times a day. So afterwards, I was really excited and nervous. It's like, okay, do I actually believe this? And I just waited and nothing happened for, a few seconds, then minutes, then hours, then days, then weeks, then months, and now it's been years without a single symptom. And, it just really helped solidify everything that happened in my near-death experience, why I really like the way Dr. Joe took me there. Like I said, it's not for everybody. There are so many different ways to get there that, if you find one that you resonate with, that's what you should do. I'm not here to say he's the only way because there are so many doors to a house.
Right. Well, I think then the higher order bit of this entire conversation is the universe pulled you over there to show you that you can heal yourself. Okay,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
pop over to this side here and do real time manifestation. You see the power of that? And also to go through the tube of the matrix, the zeros and ones in the qubits, to see that that's a part of it. That's the visual image that happens during this healing. Now, go back to your physical world and go over there and find the avenue to get that feeling again. Okay? And it took you a while. Because
Hmm.
before you found Joe Dispenza, you went and did a little surgery, didn't you? We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Yep.
Yeah. But so you finally found Joe Dispenza after going down a couple of dark alleys, right? And when you get into that, you found yourself back there in the nothingness, and the matrix qubits were showering down, and you go, I know this feeling. This is wonderful. And from that, you took the healing and came out of that and go, I can do it here. I don't even have to be over there. I figured it out. I cracked the code. That is crazy amazing. So thanks. But you know what? Whoa, let's back up a little bit. Before you got to the nirvana, you went down the traditional medical route. What happened there?
Yeah, so right after my near-death experience, everything was so kind of crazy. I didn't realize that I really wasn't having symptoms of myoclonus dystonia. And I was still trying to figure out what had happened and coming to terms with this term called NDE that I wasn't too familiar about. And, about 18 months into it, I think a little before 18 months, I finally like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I may have had this NDE." And I had done some research on NDEers before, or at this point, from my NDE to about 18 months into it, and I learned about all these different people who healed from their like miraculously healed. I was like, oh my gosh, I think that's what happened is I had this NDE and I miraculously healed from this neurological movement disorder. And I got invited onto Jeff Marr's podcast. And at the time, he was pretty small still. About 2018, I think, is when I was on, and he had a decent following, but it was nowhere near like it is now. And I share, my experience and that, I no longer have symptoms. And around the same time, I started going back to my old career. I'm like, okay, I feel better. I can go back to my old career and be better at it. I can accomplish more. And, I was really excited to just be a better version of my old self. And because I still didn't really know what all of this was about. And, so I was like, okay, do the American dream, work hard, climb the ladder, buy a house, have a family, have kids, all that stuff. And that's what I was trying to do. I said, oh, now that it's gone, this myoclonus dystonia that was really interfering with my life is gone. I can do it. I can do it way better. Then it came back. And it came back with a vengeance. So then I spiral. I was like, oh my gosh, I was on this podcast and I told, the world that my NDE healed my neurological movement disorder. And oh my gosh, am I a phony? Am I a fraud? Like, why is it back? Did it not heal? Just did I not even have a near-death experience? I really spiraled for a little while and I was just like, well, I don't know what else to do about it. I'm just gonna continue on doing what I was doing. So, went back to work and the illness progressed. And it progressed to the point that in 2021, I lost my independence. I was tremoring so bad I couldn't do my eyeliner, I couldn't put on earrings, I couldn't button clothes, I couldn't text, I couldn't type, I could hardly walk. And it was really taking away, I tried really hard to enjoy life, and it was making that very, very difficult. I couldn't drive anymore. I lost my sense of independence, which I worked really hard to have my whole young adult life. And then my mom, once again, amazing advocate in my life, amazing warrior, amazing wing woman. She just, she never gave up. I gave up many times, but she did not. And she found this support group on Facebook for myoclonus dystonia. And this gal who is around my age, gorgeous gal, was going in for her second deep brain stimulation surgery for myoclonus dystonia. My mom and her started talking. She's like, "Oh, send me videos. I'll show my doctor." Her doctor was a pediatric neurologist, and here I am at 29 years old. He sees my videos. He's like, "Get her. Like, I want to see her." And specialists usually take months to get in. They usually are late. Gosh, I've had specialists that kept me in the waiting room for 5 hours on our first appointment after waiting 6 months to get in. And this guy saw my videos and said, I'll see her within the week. However, he was in Kansas and I couldn't get there fast enough. So I had a meeting with him at the end of the month and It was on a Friday afternoon, 4:30. He showed up early, like 5 minutes early, spent the whole hour with me, apologized that no one had offered me this brain surgery before, and sent me straight over to the surgeon's office without an appointment at 4:15 or 4:30 on a Friday when they're all getting ready to go home. And I had a consultation for deep brain stimulation. And I would end up having the surgery 3 months later, and it was actually pretty successful. It went well. They were able to do the two parts. They usually do the lead inserts into the brain on one part, and then they do the battery and the extension that's down the neck on a second one. But it went so well, they were able to do it all at once. And I came out with a significant improvement. And after that, I was like, okay, that's the answer, all right, we're good. That's the answer. I'm good to move on. And I was like, okay, now it's time to go rewrite some things that I wrote out of survival. And it was, while I was healing from brain surgery, I thought, okay, this is the answer. And I got a wonderful job offer. Um, just a really respected position that I didn't even know was possible. I was in marketing for the construction industry, and they don't really appreciate marketing as much. They're like, we need it, but you're not important. And this one was, and I was so excited. But my mom, once again, came to me and she's like, do you really think you're ready? You just had brain surgery. Do you want to go at this full steam ahead and, crash? And I agreed with her hesitantly and declined the position. And I grieved for a month. Like, oh my gosh, I just destroyed my life. I worked, my whole young adult life to get here, and I was well respected in the field. And what the heck is all this for? So I kind of spiraled again. Like, what was my NDE for? What was this surgery for if this isn't it? And that's when I turned down the position. I did soul searching, and I tried some different types of meditation and self-hypnosis and kind of got some answers. I was shown that I needed to write some books, which I thought was so silly because I was not a reader or a writer. It's like, really, I've got to write books. That's my purpose. They were actually just stepping stones. So I was showed that to cross this river of change, I needed to write books to cross it. And so I started there. And then I started doing anything and everything that touched my heart, trying to find out what the heck my purpose was. I'd volunteer, I'd do little side gigs. And then the Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat was going to be 6 hours away from me, sold out for months. I didn't even know about it. And my mom's dog walker worked with Dr. Joe Dispenza for many, many years, and Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden. And she's like, you need to go. It's sold out, but you still need to go and show up and get yourself in. And so I bought his book, Becoming Supernatural. I listened to I took the progressive intensive course with only 2 weeks before this retreat was happening. And I was finishing up as I'm driving across the mountains to this retreat. And I get in and, sign up on the walk-in list. And they're like, yeah, we'll email you. And so then I take the rest of the day, I go meditate, I focus on, seeing myself in there. And I get to my hotel and I clean up and still no email, and registration's about to close. I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to go back to where the conference is and, wait there, put that energy out. And nothing's happening. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to go ask. And I asked the lady, and she's like, I sent you an email. You're in. Like, I don't know why she was so upset about it. And I was like, I didn't get it. She's like, fine, let me send it to you again. And then they are closing the registration doors. And it's this huge ticket, like so many questions. And I'm just trying to answer them. I feel like I'm running epically, like in a superhero movie, flying through these doors. And I'm like, take your time. I was like, ah! I was so excited. And then I got in. And, I did kind of what Dr. Joe was teaching in his book and his programs is, imagine, feel yourself already there. Not just imagine it, but feel yourself already there. So when I left my hotel, when I opened that door, I visualized and felt myself opening the door to the retreat. And I got in, and it really made huge changes in my life, obviously.
Well, obviously, yes. So that's the pretty cool story because you came off the NDE and you thought you were, healed, but it crept back in a major way. And so someone helped you find, a physical doctor to attempt to alleviate. And it sounds like you put a probe in and you had an outside thing and a battery and you could sort of alleviate it to some degree. And that's, you didn't solve the problem. It wasn't the root cause, problem being solved. It was sort of kind of a workaround, a little band-aid, if you will. But it's better than nothing.
Yeah, it worked better than pharmaceuticals.
Oh, much. Oh, for sure. So that's good. That actually gets you kind of above, your head above water. So now you can actually spend some more time to really think about a nice way to do it. You get to Joe Dispenza, you get in the doors, you find this way to do the meditation, to lose yourself into the darkness, into the all that is nothing and everything. And from there, you got a proper healing. It kind of feels like if you've ever heard of a med bed. A med bed, you kind of lay down and it deals with frequencies within your body. Every single, molecule, organ, cell in your body is at a certain frequency. And if it's in an ailment state, it's out of frequency.
Hmm.
In theory, a med bed might be able to identify that and put it back in frequency, and you really would have no health issues whatsoever. But like I said earlier, it's like you went to the other side and they gave you a glimpse of what it feels like to heal yourself. And you came back and you did it here. One of the few that have, and that's what I think is crazy amazing about this story. Well, I got to tell you, that is very cool. And now I've got a series of questions that I have prepackaged that I think would be ideal to go over right now. What do you think?
I would love to.
Good. This is called Heart's First Whisper. So it's about your heart answering and not even your mind or your thoughts. So go to that nothingness world right now and use that. Okay. First question. What was the hardest part of returning to this world?
The denseness. It was so dense and so dark. Like, not in a beautiful blackness kind of way. It was heavy and dense.
Oh, yeah. Typically, it's like you've got massive amounts of information and you have to squish it down into a tiny little thumb drive. And it can't all make it. So you leave chunks of stuff behind. You take a few things with you, but you get jammed into this tiny little body. And I guess that's part of the experience that we ask for when we come here. And it feels even more painful when you go do an NDE and come back.
Yeah, it was very painful. Especially coming from a place of just pure love, curiosity, and joy back into this place full of hate, negativity, fear, judgment, anger, all this stuff. The emotions of the world were dense and heavy. The physical was dense and heavy. All of it was just very heavy.
And do you by now have a feeling of why you're here in this heaviness?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I kind of mentioned throughout my whole life, I tried really hard not to let the illness stop me. And I graduated high school early. I bought a house at 19 by myself, no co-signers or anything. Um, you know, took on independence, never tried to go for disability or anything. Because I was like, no, I can do this. I can take on the world. I want to learn. I was taking college classes before I graduated high school at 16, and just always wanted to achieve everything. Well, that comes from my soul. I also would like the fast track. So I've realized I am trying to take 5 different master's courses all at once.
Well, yeah. And by the way, so for those listening, you're talking about not going to college. You're talking about the earthly experience is that college. And while you're here, you made things really hard on yourselves, like harder than most people. And so you're talking kind of about pre-life planning and then,
Yes.
jumping in and executing. And when in a couple of questions from now, we're going to talk about that soul contract. So hang on to that thought. All right, next question is, how did the realization that creation is math impact you?
I think understanding that math and frequency have such a huge important role in our lives. It doesn't mean, I've gone out and learned, programming or software development or anything like that. I've really taken an interest in learning more about frequencies and energy and, actual creation with how that works. And you're talking about the med bed. Dr. Joe talks about that in the way he calls it is going into coherence. They can actually do physical readings on the body of your brain and your heart going into coherence. And that's frequency coming back together and fixing us, fixing all the things that take us out of that.
Right. And you mentioned how negative or positive thoughts can affect a plant. I've also heard of it as the rice experiment. So you have rice and water in a mason jar, and you label one with love and the other one with hate, and another one that's completely ignored.
Yep.
And so you'll adore one of them and hate another one and ignore the middle one. And it turns out the one you love stays white and fresh and lovely. The one you hate gets a little gnarly. And the one you ignore is actually, and this might be a surprise, is the one that actually turns the darkest and has the most density because it's just flat out ignored. Even the one that you yell at feels a little bit of energy from you. It's kind of crazy. And we're what, 70 some plus percent water? So as
Yep.
you talk to yourself or to others around you, imagine the same impact.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, number 3. How would you describe the purpose of your life today?
The purpose of my life today is being here for others. 100%. What I do, the books I've written have been to help others and know that their story, no matter how crazy it might seem, how hard, how beautiful, we all have these very unique stories. We could even be with a partner who has the same experience but different perceptions on it. And just really inspiring that healer within yourself, inspiring that power within yourself that has been diminished by our political system, our education system, our cultures, our religions that all, don't want us to realize what power we have inside. Because if we all realize how powerful we are, who's going to be able to tell us what to do? So that is a huge purpose of my life is helping people find their purpose, find their power, find their voice, find their soul.
So you're suggesting that we live on an earthly realm where there are powers that be that are telling us what to do?
Oh yeah. I know it's shocking, right? No one's ever told what to do, not by anyone ever.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think of the greater masses that it only takes a few select folks that tell you what to do for who knows nefarious reasons or whatever, because those that just really don't need, I don't have a need to tell anybody to do anything. I just don't, right? But there are just a select few that do to control, manipulate, and all those other crazy words that go on in there. And so the notion of all the stuff that we're doing and what you're sharing today is kind of wake up to the power within you. Know that you have this power to direct yourself, and your own intentions are that power, and stay with that.
Yep, 100%.
Number 4, how has your relationship with fear changed?
I was really fearful for a long time. I was fearful of this unknown illness. I was fearful of the insomnia. I was fearful of life. Just how much worse could it get? How much more can I take? And then I would go out and do fear-based things and, high sports because it's like, I was scared all the time anyway, and it felt like I could overcome that fear by just living it through extreme sports and activities. And now I don't fear anything. I am so trusting. I know what's beyond here, so I'm not scared. I wasn't scared of death anyway. I was actually so scared to live. That's really where a lot of my fear was. I was so scared to live. And now I'm not scared to live, even though I've come down with a couple more conditions that I'm working on, getting those healed too and learning what the purpose of those are. I know it'll come to me in clarity. It always does. It just takes time. And I'm not scared of that. I'm not scared of the what ifs or, the future or the past even, because it's only the internal now. So I really don't fear much. I'm very trusting. I go with the flow, and that goes with my business, my relationships, my health, just absolutely everything. So, there's tons of fear mongering on, the news and politics and, all this stuff. And I am so tuned out from all of it because I I'm just why be sucked into that? It's such a low emotion. And if I can create my reality here, I don't need to worry about, what may or may not be going on.
And do you just keep yourself away from all of that negative, or is it that it happens around you and you just don't let it affect you?
Both, obviously I'm not in a box, I'm not isolated, but I also know there are three, four, five sides to the story. And things at play that we don't always know what they are. And it's like, if it's, if I don't have really any control over creating that reality, why do I need to be a part of it when I can create my own? By having this positive, fearless energy, it also just keeps it away from me.
Exactly. And oftentimes, if it's news related, oftentimes it isn't really about what they're saying, because more often than not, what they're saying isn't quite true. Sometimes it's more of like, why are they saying what they're saying? They're trying to get this reaction out of their audience. For what purpose? Kind of roll it back a little bit to the root cause of that. You might find it helpful also. All right. So, number 5 now is what have you learned about the power of thought and emotion?
Yeah, it's the key to manifestation. It's the key to creating. Um, we also have this blessing of time, even though it can feel not like a blessing. It can feel like, oh, I want things to happen instantly, or you start to doubt yourself because you don't see it happening yet. But once again, your thought has to, it's this high frequency thought, and then it has to slow down to become real and matter. But a way to help speed that up is through emotion. You have these grateful as if it's already happened. Dr. Joe talks a lot about that. You have the love, you have the curiosity, the joy. Oh, how is it going to show up? That's a huge thing, is just being curious and not trying to force it. And then beautiful things happen. But I say that we all have the blessing of time because in my NDE, I was like, oh no, what happens if I get too close to that flame? Will I melt? Yeah, I melted. But you know what didn't exist there that exists here? Pain, fear, actual physical repercussions. So if you look, across the street and say, oh no, what happens if I, accidentally step in front of that, bus? Then instead of being in front of that bus, experiencing the pain and broken bones and whatever and fear, you have time to change. Oh, well, I'll stop at the light. I'll go a different direction. You can change where your thoughts are. So just because you have a negative thought, because we all do, that's part of being human, doesn't mean you have to let it stick there and linger. You can refocus it, you can redirect it, you can change, and with that emotion behind it, you can definitely pull that one into reality.
Yeah, and I've heard you say before that thank goodness we don't manifest instantly, because we
Yes.
do have all these crazy fear-based experiences and thoughts down here. Like, what if I end up in front of the bus? Well, we don't instantly go in front of the bus like we might on the other side, but fortunately, on the other side, we can be put back together again. Also, here we just sort of think about it and then we don't do it.
Yeah.
And thankfully, it doesn't manifest. And so that's cool. Now, the notion of thought and emotion, those are two separate things, sort of thought here, emotion, and feelings down here. I would ask a follow on question to this is sort of emotion and feelings is the notion of intuition. What does intuition feel like to you? It feels like there's a lot of people that are just not in touch with that.
Yeah, once again, we are taught out of our intuition. I believe we all firmly have it. We grow up with it and we're taught out of it. And I help some of my clients by tapping back into their intuition. There's games we can play with the universe. I really like Pamela Grout's E Squared book because it helps you learn to trust your intuition again. And it's also the first thought or feeling you have when you ask a question or, there's a scenario. It's what comes after is your brain trying to logically make sense of it. Oh, but what about this, this, and this? Your intuition is that very first instinct, your very first thought, your very first feeling. And it could only be, a split second.
Do you have a physical sensation associated with that? Like if you're sort of thinking about something and you engage with someone on a particular topic and all of a sudden your whole body gets, tingles throughout it and you're so excited about it, it feels like, is that just a random notion of, hey, this sounds fun? Or is that some intuition that's jumping in there to tell you you're on the right track?
Oh, yeah. So it doesn't happen every time with intuition. It doesn't need to be that loud and that present, but it definitely can happen. And I think it's so exciting because it's, I feel like my higher self or guides or the universe, coming in and like making it known, like, hey, this is awesome. You're on the right track. You're maybe in coherence with the other person's energy or this other activity's energy. And, it's synchronized. It's maybe you put this on your path, all of that stuff. So it's just an extra loud, shout at you.
Oh, to get your attention.
Yep.
And then you kind of tune into, oh, okay, I got a blast. I'm going to make sure every time I get a blast like that again that I know that, this is a good thing for me. It's kind of, or if your intention is even way more subtle, but if you continue to get that little subtle message, train yourself to know, to pay attention and not overlook a signal like that. It kind of feels right.
Yeah.
And number 6, what do you now believe about self-healing? Now, and what's your direction to folks? Because you've done it and shared that story, but what's like baby steps into folks doing their own self-healing?
Yeah, it definitely needs to start from a place of healing your soul and your heart. So I couldn't have done it when I was, feeling like I was not worth, healing. I didn't feel worth being loved. Therefore, I didn't really love myself. And that's no, that's not how you get healed. That is not how you heal. You have to come at it with love and gratitude for yourself first. So I think that is a huge thing is, really work on, these traumatic experiences. Being human is traumatic. And there's different things we go through all the time that are traumatic. Loss of our loved ones, loss of relationships, jobs, places, things, just there's so many hard things we go through, and learning to be grateful and how to accept them and yourself is going to be the number one biggest part, the biggest step into being able to actually heal from these physical chronic conditions. Because first you heal your heart and your mind, and then when they're healed, they can go into coherence and do physical healing.
Interesting. Yeah. So it kind of feels like the first thing you have to do is heal the relationship with yourself. Like
Yes.
if you're very judgmental, and it's like, oh no, yeah. So you've got to find yourself to have unconditional love for yourself. So you're not judging yourself in any way. Now I kind of feel worthy of healing some of the physical and other things that I have going on as well. So let's focus on those. Feeling worthy gives you that confidence and that full, true intention that I really do want to fix myself.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Hey, number 7. Now we're going back to soul contract. As I mentioned, did your soul contract change based on the NDE, or was the change you went through already set up in your pre-birth plan?
So my contract definitely was set up in my pre-birth plan. Even at 17, my mom said something about us entering the soul contract together, and I had no idea what she was talking about until much later. Hindsight is so clear. Um, but I also talk about, you can pay down a soul contract, or you can, by acknowledging that you have this contract to, let's say you come down with Lyme disease or cancer. Okay, you have met those terms. You experienced that Lyme disease. You experienced that cancer. That doesn't mean it has to go on indefinitely. You have met the terms and conditions. The contract is now, no, it's completed. Some people just will stay in this contract not knowing that they've already met the terms and conditions of it.
So if that's the case, you could sort of think of your life blueprint, as a series of mile markers along the way. And maybe one of them is, as you said, oh, I'm going to have Lyme disease. Okay, but
Yep,
you don't have to have that your whole life. That's
exactly.
just your current challenge. Spend your focus and your intention overcoming that in whatever way it comes to you. And when you overcome it, continue on. But no, there's another mile marker out there in front of you, some other challenge.
Yep.
And you'll do that as well. So don't give up ever. Know that you've designed these, you've meditatively designed these so that these are the things you overcome while you're here. And that's the objective. So just keep going.
Same with abuse or addiction or, just any of the myriad of really hard things we go through. Um, it's just, yeah, we've put these mile markers in our contract. And then people ask me about, well, what about free will? If we've pre-designed this, how do we have free will? I like to say if you're traveling from California to Florida, those are your two milestones. You're going from point A to point B. You're going to get there. But how are you going to get there? Are you going to fly? Are you going to drive? Are you going to take a boat and go around? Are you going to ride a bike? Are you going to walk? Are you going to hitchhike? What kind of car are you going to take? What kind of plane? The way you get there is where our free will is.
That's your free will, but you're definitely not going to New York. And if you start going that way, woof, the universe
Yeah,
is going to steer you to the right.
it always does.
Exactly. Cool. All right. Number 8. How did meeting the Creator change your understanding of God?
Oh man, that's such a big one. being raised in one religion and then what I experienced, I came back and researched a ton of religions and philosophies. Like, who has it right? And I've become more of an omnist, which is there's a truth in all of them, but there's just no way to put who the creator and who the God is into our physical human language. And, of course, I don't know all the languages, but there is just such a peace of knowing that I was home and I was loved and I'm an extension, that gets to create all these different, versions and we get to relate back, as if he's a teacher or it's a teacher and we're just little kids that get a report back about our experiences. So just the absolute peace and comfort knowing there's no judgment. If anything, these judgments or life reviews, it's you reviewing yourself and you reviewing your own actions and how they affected others. Um, there's no hell because hell, well, not necessarily no hell, but no damnation for eternity, because eternity is a time-based concept and time doesn't exist beyond here. So you cannot be doomed to eternity because there's no such thing as eternity.
Wow. Okay, so this is interesting because I have heard you talk before about the notion of taking low density, dark energy with you to the other side. And if you do that and you can manifest instantly, you'll manifest a surrounding. They may look very much like, the dark side, right? And yet, if you instantly say, like I melted and I want these folks to put me back together again, you could also say, I want to just go in love and peace and joy. Pow! You're now in the most beautiful heaven there ever was. So you're not really jammed in there forever and so forth. You really have an opportunity to control that a little bit, as you mentioned, on the other side. So why do you think that it is in this physical world where the higher percentage of folks haven't gone to the other side and had this wonderful experience you did? That's why they love hearing these, by the way, because they all really want to do that. They love hearing the story. But in short, in the world where they did not have that experience, they're trying to figure things out. Now, since they were born and raised and lived their life, they're told other stories about this sort of thing, and they have no way of knowing what's real and what's not real. They haven't been to the other side. So what's your message to that world?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to those milestones and how are you going to get there? If you did not place a near-death experience in your life, but you placed hearing about them, having the curiosity for them, having these synchronicities, maybe awakening, maybe exploring transcendental meditation. You place those milestones to get to the same place. And for the people who, that's not part of their plan at all, they could care less about these stories. They could care less about transcendental meditation or learning more, or, having strong opinions or one way or the other. Some people are just very integrated in their faith. They're like, I don't, my faith is strong enough. I don't need to know more right now. And there is nothing wrong with that. That is just what we have put into our path, our lives to experience. So I had to have an NDE because I am stubborn as all get out. And I need a large kick in the pants a lot. I believe that the universe had given me several soft ways into it that I just completely ignored. So they're like, all right, we're gonna shove you. We're gonna shove you off your cliff. We'll catch you, but you're jumping off the cliff. Where other people, they don't need such a harsh awakening. Because it is very, very hard for a lot of NDErs. It's a very it's pretty traumatic. The dying process in itself, coming back, not knowing what's going on, understanding there's this amazing beyond and we're stuck here, just all these different things. And there are much gentler ways of getting there, like through different meditations and different ceremonies and different, ways of being, and all that stuff. So that's why I had to do it the hard way, but other people get, a life raft when I had to swim, kind of like that.
Yeah, and the NDE is one painful way to do this, as you mentioned, but there's also the notion of OBE, so
Hmm.
out of body experience, which I, sort of hear more and more of, where you can kind of go through it in a controlled way, where you can still get to the other side and have these amazing experiences. And you do it by certain methods and practices, and that seems to be there's more of that going on right now, which is Very helpful because then you can do it over and over and over. You can repeat, you can learn more from the other side. It isn't just a sort of a one and done. Now, by the way, a sub bullet on this is when you were on the other side and came back, how would you categorize the additional capabilities that you have now?
Yeah, I came back with medical intuition. I could actually feel where something was wrong in somebody's body. If I drove past a car accident, I could feel if, they had whiplash, if seatbelt burn, broke something, didn't make it. That was extremely, extremely hard and traumatic because, now I've got all these other people's pain. I could also hear people's thoughts very, very clearly. And it was kind of fun until I started hearing all the negative ones and, also feeling the emotions with them. And that was very dramatic and overwhelming. So I have been able to tap down. I no longer actually feel the sensation of people's pain. I'm very connected intuitively. So often I will get, pictures or parts of words of what someone's going through. I can occasionally still hear thoughts, but I don't get the feelings associated with them, which is really nice. And I also have had a few psychic medium experiences where I didn't know this person, I didn't know the family or anything, and they came through, and everything was that I said was proven, and I had no information about it in the back end, which was really also really kind of scary when it happened. But looking back now, it's pretty cool as well. So those are some of the big things, but mostly being so in tune with, my veil is so thin now after doing all this work and doing all this practice to be close to the blackness, to the void, to the everything and all the answers and possibilities that, when I work with people in the different capacities that I do, I can tap in and really help guide them however they need guidance.
Well, that's great. And that sets us up for when we talk about your website and your services that you have. And I got one question before that, the final one here, which is, how would you help folks and what would you share with someone who's currently, again, doesn't have that experience you've had and is really trying as hard as they can, but they're really trapped in fear?
Yeah, it's going to go back to a lot of training, training your mind and your body to come out of that fear. And there's some great techniques for it. EFT and TFT tapping, or EMDR if you want to go to a practitioner to do it. If you want to do it yourself, you can do different tappings on your meridians, which is really cool. It's like self EMDR that I really, really enjoy. And just being aware of, your fear and, learning different techniques on how to not let it get out of control, realize that you are in control and that you can really change that and change that frequency into something different. But it takes work and it takes practice and it takes, knowing how to do it.
And maybe connecting with someone who's very skilled in the art, like
Yes.
yourself. I
Yes.
think that would be good advice right there. There's one other thing that you mentioned in your NDD I wanted to cover quick. Is you said you went into this space where there's a barbed wire fence. Now, there's a fence is like, a long wire, but what's a barbed wire fence? Well, that's where it's got barbs on it, right? And those barbs are like these little metal pieces sticking out every, couple of feet or so. And, it's used typically to keep your cows in. If you got cows, you don't want them out. So you have a fence. They'll walk through that quick, but a barbed wire fence, they kind of feel a poke, so they stake in. And, beyond that, it could be an electric fence, which will really send them a signal to get back in. So that particular barbed wire experience that you had was there to keep you out. It's like some orange cones kind of thing. But on the other side, it was even a little blurred out, so you couldn't really see it. What do you think was over there?
I believe it was a higher dimension. So, I wasn't in a place that I would consider heaven, or even other NDErs who have been in a very heavenly like experience, where it's just, the most vivid, beautiful colors. You see your past loved ones. There, you might have some life reviews. There's, sometimes these castles of healing and all this stuff. I was in a playground, just like you said earlier. It was a playground. And I knew that there were dimensions higher frequency, higher emotions, and as well as lower. So that's what I believe is beyond there. And I guess I've never thought about it being a barbed wire fence, even though people are like, well, why was it barbed wire? And I was like, I don't know, it was just a fence. But yeah, I could. I mean, I don't think it would. There's no pain, so the barbed wire doesn't make any sense to keep you out because there's no pain over there.
Right. No, you wouldn't feel the pain, but it sends the
Yeah,
message, that there is in our physical manifestation, that symbol of a barbed wire fence
yep,
does suggest don't go beyond here.
yeah,
And I think that was the message being sent visually for sure.
yeah.
And so that's cool. Who knows what it was over there? It feels like there was a lot of departments over there, like a department store, and you went into, whatever, so you went in there and you got a great dose of how to heal yourself, manifesting instantly. Now take it back and figure it out there. And when you're there, go help some people, not only with, helping them with your skills, but also help people develop their own skills, it kind of feels like.
Oh yeah. I'm definitely here to help other people develop their skills. I don't consider myself a healer. Yeah, I mean, I healed myself, but I don't heal other people. I teach them ways they can help heal themselves. And sometimes that can be, anything from, fear, depression, anxiety to grief and loss and even spiritual, a lot of spiritual people and religious people have been really hurt. And finding their way back to their authentic selves is, kind of, I call myself a transition guide, and I guide you through these major transitions of this life.
And I love that word instead of the word death, the notion of transition. All right.
Hmm.
So, does this help when you're working with people to say, listen, there really isn't a death, it's a transition over to the other side? And what you do then is you put a new blueprint together for another physical manifestation you would like. So, there's the notion of reincarnation and choosing multiple lives and then transitioning in and out of one side and the other. And there's purpose and reason behind the whole thing. Explaining that, does this help folks, or are they just go, that can't possibly be?
I've never had someone say, "Oh, that's not possible." And it's funny, I forgot to mention it took me 5 years to realize why the monks were laughing. But they're laughing because when I asked if I was dead, death isn't a thing. I cannot be a thing that does not exist. And we are just a transition of energy. And some people are like, "Well, this was a really hard life. Do I have to come back? Do I have to reincarnate?" Absolutely not. But once you get back over there and realize how much you've learned and how much more there is to be able to experience, you're probably going to choose to come back and do some more. Even if it's really hard right now and you're really tired right now, you don't have to come back right away. You can rest, you can hang out with your past loved ones, you can hang out with your soul groups, and redesign a new life, and what you want to experience next time.
Yeah, I had a guest. His name is Bruce Vanetta. I interviewed him about a month or so ago, and when I asked him the question about death and dying and all that, he just called it best day ever because he did go through it. He knows what the other side is, and like a lot of folks, I don't want to come back to this pain, because but when you get to the other side and you work through all that, you review everything that you've done, and you're so like glad that it's over. And time goes by. Well, there is no time, but at some point you just go, the university was really great. I only really remember the good parts, but it
Yep.
was important that I did the bad parts anyway, because that's where I really learned. And maybe on the other side, it's so blissful, you can't have any negative experiences. So you have to come into physical manifestation to have it and to grow and to learn from that knowing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my mom often hates this, but I just tease her saying, "Hey, you're the one who got me here." She's the one who taught me about, things beyond the religion and, things that are beyond what I can see or describe. And she really pushed me into the spiritual self. But she'll be upset about something. I'm like, well, you get to experience it because you get to experience this anger, this trauma, this, unrest, civil unrest, and all this stuff. And she's just, she gets really upset sometimes. I'm like, hey, you get to experience this right now. And she's like, really? Like, yeah, you pushed me into this. This is your fault.
And you do need that reminder, that it is a very short period that we're here. It may feel like a long time, and we're here with these milestones set up. And somehow, as crazy as it gets, remind yourself each and every day that that's what it's about. And also to keep yourself in sort of love and bliss and harmony and coherence with others to the extent that you can. It makes it even more enjoyable. And it feels like you get through your milestones even more quickly,
Oh,
and you do
absolutely.
learn the lessons.
Yeah, because if you are grateful or you can find a little bit of gratitude or humor in, the pain, if you're suffering happily, you're still in a heart of gratitude. That's a higher frequency emotion. Therefore, that can help create those good frequency realities. So the more you can find the joy, the purpose, suffering happily, being grateful for these experiences, even when they're hard, that's really how you get out of that, the pain and the suffering much, much faster.
And I am grateful for you being here today. I'll tell you that.
I am also grateful.
Okay, well, there you go. We're co-creating gratefulness, I think. So, I know a lot of the folks watching this are definitely grateful also to hear as much as they can, and they'd like to connect with you. Let's go there now. Talk about your website and your books, services, and the whole deal.
Sure. So my website is BRI0NICLLC.com. And there, I can explain that. So my name Brianna. After brain surgery, I was called Bionic, and then I experienced all these ones and zeros, so I had to put a zero in my business name. So it's Brionic with a zero because I thought it was so cool. And logistically, it's been a little hard, but I still love the name.
It's easy to find because it's up on the screen right now. And also click, down in the description if you just want to go straight to it, you can go that and do that too.
Perfect. There you can find any way of getting a hold of me. You can find my books, which I now have 5 books. I just released my 5th on grief, and I've got 3 award-winning ones currently for sale as well. And I do have 2 different time slots of services. One is 30 minutes, one is 60 minutes. If you are curious about it, you can send me an email. My email is also on my website. All my socials are on my website. You're welcome to hit me up on any of those, ask me any questions. And of course, if there's a interview that goes on YouTube, I also link it to my website to make it easy to find, all things free.
Well, I'll certainly share this link for sure.
Awesome.
Good. Well, that's wonderful. They're going to go and see your website, your services, how to follow up with you, how to connect with you. All the social is there and all of that, and that is wonderful. And of course, leave all sorts of comments. The folks that have watched my podcast, I interact with folks through comments all the time. I don't know that there is a comment that happens that I don't jump in on there and at least like, love, or reply, or all 3. So thank you, Brianna. Now, before we close out, is there any last message that you didn't get out today that you really have to get out to this audience?
Yeah, I think just being grateful and aware of this life that you're able to live. It could be hard, but there is something beautiful in it, and you can find your purpose through your pain, usually.
Nice. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for the strength that it takes to revisit these moments. And I know you do this over and over, and people just love it, and they are so impacted, and they benefit from it. And, for the light that you've brought through your story today, you remind us that even in the depths of grief, love is never lost. I love that. Thank you, Brianna.
Thank you so much.
And to our listeners, if Brianna's words touched your heart, I invite you to like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who would need it. And definitely, someone who's walking through their own loss and looking for hope and, that would benefit from all the things we talked about today. And if you had an experience that changed your view or life of death, leave that in the comments down below, and we will get into that discussion ongoing. And until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and go beyond the illusion to discover your true self. Take care, everyone, and bye for now.